Morning, Kishan.
Good morning, Floris.
So today we're going to talk about the investments that Anthropic and OpenAI did in almost the same week. They launched or they put on their blog an announcement that they're building a new enterprise AI service company, OpenAI the same. So which actually means that they're just going into the people business, the implementation business, which is interesting to say the least. OpenAI calls it the deployment company, which is backed amongst others by Bain, Capgemini, and McKinsey. So they will do some work probably there. And Anthropic mentions that they work with Accenture, Deloitte, and PwC, amongst others. So obviously they don't do all the work themselves, but they have created a whole ecosystem. I would like to discuss a bit about what actually the plan is and how they work, what the idea and the strategy behind it is, and why they are doing this. So building the model is not enough, but the bottlenecks, the deployment inside the real organization. What are your first thoughts when you saw this?
My first thoughts were it's an interesting move. So the way usually these tech companies go is that they build something and they partner with external parties that basically become their resellers and their experts. So they don't have to have these personnel on hand to do these implementations because it basically is a typical consulting business, right? Maybe a similar idea would be IBM, right? IBM built software, but IBM, they earn money on their software and their licenses, but the vast majority of money and revenue is gained by selling services on this software. I saw a figure that enterprise companies spend 6 times as much money on buying services to deploy, maintain, and grow software for every dollar spent on the software itself. So you buy something for 100, you spend 600 to get it live in the organization. And that's, of course, a very big piece of the pie that normally goes to typical consulting and outsourcing businesses, where, for example, a Microsoft usually didn't really have their own engineers deployed inside the companies to do these implementations. If you buy a Microsoft product, you would need to go to a Microsoft certified partner to implement it inside of your company. Right now, Anthropic and OpenAI are basically going the route in, hey, we want to get that piece of the pie ourselves.
Do you think that's the idea that they have, or do you think the speed of the adoption and the integrations of the models inside the organizations, as in the institutional AI, they think the models are far better than what is adopted, or at least what you need maybe to adopt inside the organization? Is there not a big gap between the work that they're doing and what actually is adopted inside the organization that they want to speed that up?
Maybe, but of course, this only scales so much. So we can only get many people onboarded in this momentum. So the first 100 former deployed engineers, the first 200 will probably accelerate a whole bunch of stuff, but then it becomes a people business. Similar to consulting, you have a whole bunch of juniors coming in that don't necessarily accelerate all the work that you want to do. The most gains will be had by the first people that get onboarded by this, because then you have basically the A team of the business in your business. The more it grows, the more it becomes a typical people business, a service business, and there is where the issues will become clear. Is that similar to any other service company, the A team is only so big. And then you get lower tiers of teams that have lower velocity, lower ROI to come.
You might explain how they intend to be working in the future is that they put their own front deployed engineer. So if they put those guys in first, and then they do the heavy lifting, they probably then afterwards all the expensive consultants of McKinsey and Bain and PwC will also come in for like a long time
Yeah,
to do all the work.
then it becomes a typical consulting business because the more hours you write, the more you earn. But as I said, you can only help so many customers with this proposition. It's the same as if we as Eli 5 would grow tenfold, I know the quality will decline because I can only keep our level of expertise up to a certain standard, up to a certain amount of people. If you grow up more than 50 people in a tech-heavy business, something will start to decline because you cannot maintain that level of quality because there's not enough overheads to maintain that. And also, the people business is inherently difficult because there's a lot of incoming and outgoing people, a lot of changes, a lot of sales that need to be maintained. You need to have managers that manage those engineers. You need to have salespeople that have these contacts to deploy more engineers. The engineers won't probably sell themselves, right? It's similar as a consultant. A junior consultant will be inside of a company doing what they need to do, but they won't probably sell more of their services that the consulting company wants them to. That's where senior people come in or salespeople come in.
And so looking at the work that they want to do inside these organizations. So in the articles, it is of course not much that they disclosed at this point in time, although there you can find different sources that say give a bit more detail. But as it looks at first sight, is that the OpenAI is going to target large enterprises, and Anthropic will go more for the mid-sized companies.
Yes.
And they also say something about the community banks and regional health systems. I think looking at the type of work they expect to do or want to do. So when we do software modernization, it's often focused on one system, one application, one platform. They talk about sitting inside the customer and redesigning workflows, connecting models to customers' data and tools. This is really like not only partly software modernization, but also system integration and modernization. What do you think they, in your own words, what do you think they might encounter, or what is their plan actually? Before I'm going to launch a conspiracy theory that I'm definitely going to ask you about also. But what do you think? What's their plan on doing what type of work inside these organizations?
But the plan, I think, is very straightforward, right? There's no hiding it. Is that they're coming for the piece of the pie that normally goes to big IT integrators. That's what they're trying to do. They right now have the technology, but they don't have the service manpower to sell that, and that traditionally goes to these IT service companies because they have the manpower. Right now, they want to have that piece as well. So it makes sense, right? I mean, the whole problem with this AI adoption in not even bigger companies, in companies, is that they don't have the knowledge. And this is also, it's basically the same as what we sell. We sell our knowledge of these very different systems and our capabilities to help companies get ahead. It's basically the same as what they're doing. The only thing they do different is that they also have the technology behind it. So they are more focused in their own ecosystem, whereas we are proficient in many different ecosystems. So it's very straightforward what they're trying to do. They're trying to sell their technology. Companies become dependent on their technology. The wheels keeps on turning with the revenue, because revenue goes to both ways: maintaining the technology and selling the license of the model.
Making money is almost always the same argument in capitalistic systems. Make more money.
Yeah.
So as just extrapolating that idea, the service company makes the deals with the enterprises or small medium-sized companies. They put their engineers in, then they hand over the work, probably because they only have so many people, they hand over the work to the other firms like McKinsey and Deloitte, which probably will be invoiced through the service company of OpenAI and Anthropic, which is some kind of leverage. And I suppose that makes you a lot of money integrating or doing this work. But suppose looking at from another perspective, if you are the first engineer to join an enterprise to do this type of work, you can also dictate the architecture and the whole system, the setup. Suppose, like, maybe more or less from a bit of a pessimistic angle, they obviously want to build out their monopolies further. And if they integrate or build the system with Anthropic or OpenAI, the systems, that they probably also will cause a vendor lock-in, such as Microsoft did, obviously also. What do you think? Also from an Eli 5 perspective, where we look at more or less, we want to change the models or be able to swap models if possible. What do you think about this whole idea of being very dependent on one of these firms or one of these models then?
Well, it goes against what we stand for. Of course, I cannot really agree with that. But from their business point of view, from Anthropic or OpenAI's point of view, and these joint ventures, of course, it makes sense. You want people to be locked into your ecosystem, because if they cannot get out, you earn more money on the long term, because it's either too much of a hassle to get out of it. So you just keep on continuing, or you have to spend a lot to get somebody from a different service company in to figure out what they did and to extrapolate that into a different system. Same as always, if you get somebody from their own ecosystem into creating these things, probably sell their own ecosystem.
But most clients are not that crazy, I suppose. If you get an offer of the first question that you will ask as to the service company is, can I swap the model? And right? Or
Well, I don't think I think the companies they are targeting are not companies that don't do anything with this. I think they're targeting companies that do something with it but don't get anything out of it. And then the sell is pretty easy, right? It's okay, we do it for you for a price, but we do it our way, so you get your ROI back.
I suppose they will have very convincing deals. I think they will be subsidizing these services heavily, also
Of
seeing
course.
also what the investments are.
Yes. Yeah, there has to be. The competition are as I said, the traditional IT integrators, which are mostly based offshore. And you have to compete on price, but also on manpower. So they probably will subsidize what they sell, either the cost of their model, the cost of the team, or lock you into a framework contract where you have to pay later for these returns that you're getting. I don't know. We don't know the business models because this is just, fresh from a week ago. And especially OpenAI, they they need to get a return of investment because they promised investors, I think, a 17% return every year, which is crazy for an investment, right? Normally you would lose money before you gain money, but they just flat out said, hey, we will earn a return on your investment from the get-go.
If you look at from a European perspective, that I think that would be an interesting angle also. I suppose we don't have really a frontier LLM that works as good as one of those two. And secondly, we don't have, or at least you can say Deloitte and McKinsey and PwC have branches in the Netherlands, obviously, but they are inherently US focused. Is this going to be a problem for the European companies that they both have the model and now the service company that has a significant power? Or do you see opportunities here also?
Well, there is an opportunity for Europe to make something out of this, but the problem is we probably don't have either the technical capabilities here because everyone that it would be crazy not to because the whole compensation structure is vastly different in the US than here. Getting into these things is also a problem here in Europe because we don't really have an ecosystem that is friendly for capital injection into risky things. You can, of course, but we don't really have that much investment into companies that do something vastly experimental or unproven. And this is proven, but the upfront cost of creating a model is so ginormous that it would be a risky investment to get a return on that. And
Right.
we just don't have the ecosystem for that. There are probably not investors that want to invest into these things because we can also not give away shares that easily. We don't have an ecosystem for labor that is uniform across one nation. Europe is normally put as one thing, but it's not one thing. It's vastly different rules in different countries and different people.
Which holds us back, I suppose. But I can also make an argument, especially if you look at some of the series on Netflix, like Person of Interest, against, or at least putting some compliance rules and regulations for these models and what they're capable of doing in the near future, probably even more.
I agree, but it's just that we are behind and we can really never catch up because China and the US are just, they're way ahead of what we are trying to do. And the only thing we have is Mistral, which is a French AI company. They are doing good things, but they are just way behind.
Yeah, we want to talk about solutions and be optimistic, but this is really something that I think the US has seen, or at least the US environment, the context there, and everything around software development and language models. This is probably to their benefit significantly in the near future, I suppose, what they're doing now.
Well, we have to see where it goes, but at least right now they are on the cutting edge where we are nowhere near it.
Okay, so then for a little bit of maybe close to conspiracy theory, we know that the data, when you call the Claude API or GPT, that the data you have to trust the provider to a certain extent. But what about the data in this case, right? All the data. Do you see a reason for these frontier model companies to do this because they also can maybe with a little less boundaries can get data and make their models better?
It would be a gold mine, of course. The internal company data to train your models, especially because it's data that's not public. But we just don't know. We don't know. It's all part of the agreement that they will put forward to do these engagements, and we have no clue. This just started, so I don't even think there is a company right now that uses these services because they just don't exist yet. And we also don't know how they will do it, right? I think Anthropic does it a little bit differently. They use more of a partner ecosystem, a traditional partner ecosystem. So you're the technology provider, you have some account managers or a solution partners, and you partner with different companies to sell your services to help them sell your service better tomorrow, which has 150 plus people actually doing these things already. So they are really going the traditional route of selling the services themselves. And we just don't know how how Anthropic is going to do it because there's no news on that yet. They just said they will partner and use the partner ecosystem, but OpenAI will have direct access to this acquisition. So if you look at it very high level, OpenAI has the ability to do what you said. It's basically have access directly as a company to data that they usually didn't have access to because they both own the deployed engineers and the model they use.
Yeah.
And the writing engagement.
It's a quite a brilliant business move because obviously they saw that the institutional AI is very difficult to get right, And if they would not get involved, it probably would take them too long before they can prove the return on investment, if ever. So it is actually quite and they do that all of the time, like good business moves. They're very good at that. But it is surprising that they do it in the same week, right? So it's almost if they discussed it amongst each other.
Yeah, it's very curious to see within a week they both do the exact same thing with different partners. But they do it a little bit differently, but yeah, it's similar. But the way I think this came about is basically out of the playbook of Palantir. They did exactly the same thing. They have the software. Nobody has knowledge of the software. They deploy these people from the same company inside of their clients to basically write a playbook on how to use the software and you earn from both sides.
Well, we talked a bit about last time or times we talked about how difficult it is to if you suppose that an enterprise, an existing organization is like a large oil tanker. It is not agile at all. It's very difficult to change those workflows and to do the extreme digital transformation that is necessary to make these things work that OpenAI and Anthropic want to do. I actually am a bit surprised that they are not focused more on the sort of the innovation where you have or innovation redesign of a company instead of, which is exactly what we talked about last week, like redesigning the factory. It needs to be redesigned before the new engine can be put in. It is actually a bit surprising to me that they are going into like the sort of maybe proven, but the route that is sort of the same as if they actually want to change the old engine or the old factory, the old tanker, and not so much come up with a new one.
Maybe, but I don't think so because this is basically designing the new factory with the old school management consultant partners that have the people that can design this. Anthropic and OpenAI cannot design this new company. They know how the model works. They know how to deploy it, how to create value with it, but they don't know anything about the business behind it. And that's where the
Right.
traditional management consultants come in to design the business to work with these new technologies. So that's why I think the partnership with these Bain and Company, McKinsey's, you name it, that's where the bulk of the work lies. Because as we all know, we can put technology or we can put technologically savvy people inside of a team, but the team needs to be redesigned and the work needs to be redesigned before the team becomes effective with this technology. And that's where the traditional management consultants usually do the work.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that there will be a lot of information and data out there on what they actually will be doing. And I suppose for the people that we service and we give advice to from a strategic point of view, but also an operational point of view, every time something new comes out or some new feature or insight or tool, they need to make the decision, are we going to do something with that or are we going to wait? Are we going to pick a side or stay independent? What is the best idea for in general for a European company, mid-sized company that sees all these things happening and might be worried? What would you do if you were a CTO of a mid-sized European company?
Well, as a CTO, it would obviously be your part of your responsibility to figure these things out. But if you really have no clue, hire independent advice. Have somebody in the know inside of your company. As we have a proposition that's called an AI officer, we have the capability to basically have an interim person inside of your company figuring this stuff out with you. But independently. I mean, we are not tied to any model provider. We are not tied to any software service. We know about a whole bunch of them and we use them for our clients independently. But that makes us also know the differences and what we might need to use for certain engagements. But that would be the simplest way to get somebody and talk to somebody on how you want the company to run and how you can leverage these systems if you don't know anything about them.
I think independent is one of the most important words in this advice because you don't know, and it was always the case, I suppose, like with these frontier models, you never know if you, like for example, Microsoft really tried to get a lock-in with the Copilot thing that I think didn't really work well because the whole system or the setup was not. It was also very expensive, but that didn't work as well as GPT and Claude. But I suppose the AI officer makes sense, but also really keep an eye on everything that gets published, and then in a very short, I think, weeks or months, probably they will have their first case studies to see what they actually have been doing. And I think that makes sense also to try to see if you can copy things there, right?
So I hope that they are going to be transparent about what they're doing. We obviously don't know anything about what they're going to put out, but I hope they will share some case studies on how they use this Anthropic joint venture and how they help companies and what they did and who's responsible for what. But as it stands now, we have no clue of how this will work and what they are going to do and who's going to be responsible for what. It could also just be that they're just selling their services as in a partnership model, selling their technology in a partnership model, and the consulting company does all the work. We just don't know.
Can you already see their next move? So they first built the model, now they are going to integrate the model or models. What would be their next move? Are they going to also, are they going to buy the companies that then have the integrated models?
I think the next move is going to be buying companies like us that have the expertise, like they did with tomorrow at OpenAI. They would probably acquire companies that have the people because you need people to do this.
I think Deloitte and McKinsey and Bain, they do have engineers, but their hourly rates are like 300, 400 euros an hour, and that is probably they have good engineers, but they're super expensive. On the other side, the companies like Eli 5, it is like a very small breadcrumb if you look at what you are capable of doing with like a small team. So it is interesting to see what would be the next step, but that is the service providing side. After the service providing, what then they have running models, which then generate a lot of revenue. I suppose you want to do something with that revenue then. So I think they have been thinking 3-4 steps ahead, but I'm not seeing the next step after the service providing.
So right now you have the model, so you have the integration of the technology that's going forward. You have the integration of the people that know the technology. I think the next step will probably be the hardware that the technology runs on. So then you have an infrastructure level engagement as well. So then you are eating basically from 3 pieces of the pie. You have the license part of the deal. So you license software, which is the models and the tokens and whatever that's related to. You have the people engaged in the company that know about these things, but then probably you also create hardware that runs these things either more efficiently or does a specific thing for companies to have also an infrastructure level engagement. I don't think they will buy it, yeah. But something hardware related will probably be built that helps them, feed this ecosystem. Because I don't think it will be consumer level because it's just too low ROI. But the big bucks lie in infrastructure in this whole business.
Okay, we will see. Probably that's the answer. But interesting times. Thank you for your insights, Kishan.
Thanks, Floris. Talk soon.